In this lesson, we are going to work on the user login page. We'll start by creating a new page called the login page, and then we'll set that page as the default page for our application. We'll then start by designing the form, and finally we'll conclude this lesson by writing the code to allow the user to log into the application using Firebase authentication. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code, and the first thing we'll do in Visual Studio Code is type in the command to generate a new page called the login page. Now that the page has been created, before we run Ionic serve again, we need to modify the routes of our application so that the login page becomes the default route for our application. So I'll go to the src folder, the app folder, and I'll open app-routing.module.ts file. In this file, we have the routes for all the pages in our application, and we also have a root route. As you can see that for the root route, we are redirecting the users to the home route. So we'll change this to login, and now all the users will be navigated to the login route when the application loads up. Now that we are not using the home route anymore, we can go ahead and delete that from the routes array. Those are all the changes we need to do to app-routing.module.ts file. Now that we are not using the home page at all, we can also go ahead and delete the home folder, which contains all the files for the home page. And now I'll go ahead and run the Ionic serve command again. And as the application loads up in the browser, you can see that the page that shows up is the login page. So now we can go ahead and start writing the code in login.page.html file to design the form. Since the login page is going to be very similar to the signup page, we can copy all the code from signup.page.html and paste that inside login.page.html file. Now we can start making changes to this code. So I'll start from the top. I'll change the title of the page first. And then in our Ion content, we have the Ion list. I'm going to keep the list as it is, but I'm going to change the text on these two buttons. So I'll change the first button text to login, and I'll change the name of the function that the click event is bound to for this button. The name of the function will be login. Similarly, for the second button, I'll name the function go to sign up, and this will be the button that will navigate the user to the sign up page if they do not have an account. I'll also change the text on the button to make it something relevant. Now that all the changes are done in login.page.html, let's save the file and see how the page looks like in the browser. So as you can see that the form looks okay, the button looks okay, but the app title on the top does not have any CSS applied to it. And that's because we have defined the CSS styles in the SCSS file for the signup page. So we'll copy those CSS styles from signup.page.scss, and we'll paste all that CSS code inside login.page.scss. We'll save the file, and now you can see that the login page looks just perfect. So now that we are done with the login page.html file, and we are also done with the styling of the page, let's write the code in login.page.ts file to log the users in using Firebase SDK. So we'll start from the top. The first thing we'll do is import Firebase, and next we'll create the properties for email and password inside the login page class. Once that is done, we'll create the login function to let the users log in using Firebase authentication. So we'll type in firebase.auth.signin with email and password, and we'll pass in the user's email and the user's password to this function. Since this function returns a promise, we can execute the then and the catch functions. In the then function, we will receive a user credential object as a parameter that for now will just log to the console. Ideally, we should be navigating the user to the application page, but since the application page is not yet created, we'll come back to this piece of code later and write the navigation code to navigate the user to the application page. In the catch block, we'll handle the errors, and just like on the sign up page, we'll use a toast controller to display a toast notification to the user if an error occurs. So we'll import the toast controller, we'll inject it into the class, and then finally we'll use the toast controller to display the toast notification to the user. I'll display this toast notification for 3 seconds to the user. And the login function is complete. Before we test this application out, let's also create the second function that we need to create, which is go to sign up. The job of this function is to navigate the user to the sign up page. So we'll write the code for that. So we'll start by creating the function, and in this function, because we want to navigate the user to another page, we need the navigation controller or the nav controller. So we'll import the nav controller first, and then we'll inject it into the class, and then finally inside the goToSignup function, we'll type in this .navController.navigateForward, and this function takes in an array of strings in which I'll just pass the URL to the signup route, which is /signup. And this will allow the users to navigate to the signup page. Before we proceed, let's go ahead and test this out. So you can see that in the application, if I click on the clear button at the bottom, I am navigated to the sign up page. But from the sign up page, there is no way to come back to the login page. So let's quickly go to the sign up page and write the code to allow the user to navigate back to the login page. So I'll open the signup.page.html file first, and inside the Ion toolbar in our Ion header, I'll use a component called Ion back button, and this is a component that adds a back button to the navigation bar automatically. I'll also give this button a color of light, so the color of the back button is a white color. Next, we'll create another function in signup.page.ts file that will also allow the users to navigate back to the login page. This function is called as goToLogin, and here also we need the nav controller. So we'll import the nav controller on the top, we'll inject it into the class, and then finally inside the goToLogin function, I'll just go ahead and type in this .navController.goBack, which is a function that navigates the user back to the previous page. So now that everything is done, let's test it out. So first of all, I'll click on the clear button and I'm navigated to the sign up page. And if I click on already have an account button on the sign up page, I am navigated back to the login page. So that's working. Now let's go ahead and log in using an email and password. So I'll enter an email and I'll enter a wrong password. And you can see that I get the toast notification, the password is invalid, which is perfect. Now I'll test by inputting the correct email and the correct password. And you can see that a user credential object is logged to the console, which contains all the information about the user that has just logged in. And that concludes our login page. In the next lesson, we'll start building the main application page, which is the to-dos page.